And ignore me for a second because I realized I wasn't recording. So I got to tell these people at home what to do. So at the beginning of class, you're going to write one paragraph that answers the question, what is one effect of a social media algorithm? You're going to use Gia Tolentino as a source for that. So you're going to synthesize something she says. Try and use that paraphrase quote method. Okay, we talked a whole lot last time about like the problems that Tolentino identifies with the internet and how it's kind of like changed her way of thinking. But I don't think we really articulated why, like the psychological problem that makes these things hard for our minds to deal with. So I want to start with a bit of a conversation. It's got to be short, but I still want to have this conversation. Do you think are you the same person that you were in 7th grade? So close your eyes. You don't have to close your eyes. Really picture who you were in 7th grade. Remember some things that happened to you in 7th grade. I know I'm re-traumatizing you here. Who were your friends? What was your haircut like? What kind of clothes did you wear? What were your beliefs like and your opinions? What'd you like to do for fun? Okay, all of that, right? So you have changed a lot since, well, most of us have changed a lot since 7th grade. That's kind of like our probably, I mean, high school too, you're still changing quite a lot, you know, up until you're like in your mid-20s, we just change a ton as people. But, you know, there are parts of you that changed a lot since 7th grade, but there are still parts of you that are the same, right? Like there are still personality characteristics that are probably similar. So would you say then that people are kind of stay consistent, we stay the same? Are you the same person you were in 7th grade? What do you think? No? Okay, yeah.
I think there's still like, it's still you, like you said, there are parts of it that stay, but I think there's certain aspects that kind of like go away a little bit, or you work on other things.
So there's growth, right? But for the growth, so what you're saying is like for the growth to happen, we've got this sort of like platform of who you are, maybe like your personality, your 7th grade personality, right? And from that platform, you've maybe grown so that now you're this person up here, but you're saying like without that platform, you're not getting there. So this is still a part of
the
it.
main parts of your personality, like thinking about 7th grade, the main things I think of are like how I dressed or like things like that, how I talked. And that was more like not related to who I was exactly, but just like that was the kind of thing. But I think your personality is stable.
Okay. Does anybody feel like their personality like drastically changed since 7th grade?
I know mine will.
Some, yeah, but you're saying that like that core, that still stays the same, right? As this sort of jumping off point for who you are now. Josie?
Right. I think like there's fundamental not very often do you see people have such like you know like paradigm shifts almost, you know, like there's something that they're like mine.
Yeah.
It changes such a fundamental part of their belief or something about themselves. But you don't see that a ton. So there's always going to be some sort of like, right, that structure, that fundamental building block about yourself that you'll have.
Yeah.
But as you grow older and think like right with different influences and as you mature more and as your brain grows and all that stuff, it almost becomes more defined and like right. You just become more defined, a more defined person of yourself. You understand the world better and you understand yourself better.
So if you started off as this, like you use the word building block, if we started off as this sort of building block, like maybe you'll end up as a star. You know, you've changed and little bits have been like chipped off to form that shape that you are now, but it's still the fundamental materials. Like this is brick, that's still brick. Okay, Haley?
So I think I have just changed a ton since 7th grade because if my 7th grade self was here, she would hate me and I would hate her. Like full on 100%. I went from like literally spent all my time in the library, never talked to anybody, super like not only shy but like didn't have like very strong beliefs on anything. Like I'm super opinionated, super stubborn, And like I've changed in so many ways that I feel like, yes, who we were has an impact on who we are, but it's not that we're the same. It's that it's like always a constant choice. Do we do that how we've done that, or do we do that a different time?
Okay, so it's like, if this is your core identity, this is your, this is your personality that you had in, again, like in 7th grade. It's like, okay, well, this is my personality now that I have in 8th grade. And this is my personality in 9th grade. And as you're sort of making all these decisions, this is not the same as that. Okay, got it. So it's less of a like growth pattern and more of like a shifts. Okay, Elsa?
Well, for me, I feel like I've just gone through a lot since 7th grade, so I've just matured a lot and I'm less naive. And that's really changed a lot of my decisions with like, I don't know, like friends and just the courses of my life. I feel like my personality is still the same, just older.
Yeah, so like the knowledge part is really important, right? Like as you're gaining more knowledge, you're changing who you are, because I mean, if you're not, that's a problem, that you're not like adaptable to new information, right? So you're growing in maturity, and the question is, as you grow in maturity, does that fundamentally change who you are? This is a bit of a Theseus's ship question. Have you heard of Theseus's ship, or have we talked about it in here?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, from WandaVision, or maybe we talked about it in here, but it's like, is it still the same ship? If you've gotten so much knowledge that so many parts of yourself have changed, is it still you, or is this, you know, Whitney 2.0, and 7th grade was Whitney 1.0, and they're totally different. They might be like sort of modeled after each other, but they're different. Gracie?
I think because the world is always changing and like standards are always changing in the world, then that means like people are consistent in the way that they always change. And so I think that we're still the same even if we're changing, because what makes us human is that we can grow and change. And so we're still the same person even if we're like changing.
Yeah, so it's like the thing that made me me was like fundamentally my humanity.
Yeah.
And so if that's like what makes me, yeah, that's a very philosophical idea there. Yeah, Aaliyah?
I think a big thing about 7th grade is that I had this ideology and I was already trying to and stuff. Like
In 7th grade?
Yeah, I was so like dead set on going to college and my PhD. And I think as you like go through the stages, you kind of learn things, and you feel like you have these ideas that are based on you. Like now, I'm like going through. So I'm not doing what 7th grade me would die.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of us, like our younger selves, like have sort of set ideas about who we are going to be. I think a lot of our younger selves would be so disappointed in our older selves, right? But our older selves know better. Yeah, Nat.
I think like I probably haven't changed with it, but it's just like I've gotten more subdued. Like I think if I had my 7th grade self, like this guy's boring. Like I probably am not as interesting as like I was in 7th grade. I just
Yeah.
didn't care what anyone thought. Like I was like whatever.
You've become broken by the world, right? Yeah.
Soul, but like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like it's just like I think you just become a more complex person, and like you're the same person, but like maybe you just become like you figure out like you like just are more refined, I guess, the older you get.
Yeah.
Even though like 7th grade me like, oh, you're a completely different person. Well, it's like, well, I still like the same things that you like. It's just like I have more stuff going on. Get on my level.
Right. And you're more nuanced, right? You've got this more nuanced perspective. You can recognize gray area where younger people can't. Okay, here's my point. Let me make sure I'm spelling this right. There we go. Our identities are basically what's called a palimpsest. Anyone know what this word means? A palimpsest? Okay, this is something that kind of, it can be reused. It is something, and it doesn't have to be applying to identity or anything. It is something that is reused or altered so much as it goes on that the end product is going to look very different than the beginning product, but the traces of the beginning product are still showing. So like my identity now, like it's maybe I'm not the kid I was in 7th grade. Like I'm not, you know, obsessed with the X-Files and like and punk music and like you know, I feel like I'm not as angry anymore, you know, all of that stuff. But I kind of think that underneath, like if you look at me and if you were to meet me, if I tell you like I was once obsessed with the X-Files, that is not like a surprise to people, right? Like I don't think, because that sort of nerdy self is sort of shining through who the new self becomes. So even if you're like Kaylee and you've changed so much, I bet your parents can still see like the old self sort of like showing up in traces of the new self, right? So if our identities are palimpsestic, why could this be a problem in social media?
Because anything that you put on at any time stays there forever, so it's kind of like set in stone.
Yeah. So if a palimpsest shows that there's a trace of you, social media is showing that there is like evidence still of you. It's not just a trace anymore. It's not like you're just seeing like little crumbs of who you were. It's like the person that you were is still sort of alive online at the exact same time as the person that you are now. And that can start to feel like a real contradiction.
I think like this is really crucial in the workplace because a lot of times you'll see employers that something they said stupid like 20 years ago. They're like, sorry, we're like not employing you. You said this 20 years ago.
Yeah, right. I mean, I've got some stuff online that when students Google my name, it's really embarrassing to me. I'll just tell you because people do it. When I was in high school, the social media platform was LiveJournal. Has anybody heard of LiveJournal? So it's just basically like a blog, but it was a social media thing. So you'd have a feed of all your friends' blogs, and you'd read their blogs, and it was always very emotional. We were all in like high school at that point, so it was all just this stuff about like my parents, or somebody, like a lot of vague posting, like somebody did this and they should be ashamed of themselves, whatever. So this guy contacted me in high school, and he was like a graduate student that was writing a book about LiveJournal and emo music. And so he was like, can I get some quotes from you? And I was like, yeah, of course, I'm so important. Like I had such a high opinion of myself at that point. So if you Google my name and you dig hard enough, I was published in this book as a teenager about how my parents just don't understand me, and like the LiveJournal community, they provide me with the emotional support I need or whatever.
You should do like a return where he sees where they've all gone.
Oh yeah, that's only for like 2 years ago. Anyway, so that's out there, right? And so like now it's not my employers, I don't think would have a problem with that quote, but it's like my students can Google that. And I have had students that, like, especially when I was teaching college, that would Google that and be like, hey, I found this quote from you. It's really embarrassing. And even though I'm not that person anymore, I feel like at all, that is still, that person exists because they're online. They exist in this text at the same time as I exist. And it's like, I'm never going to escape it. That's just me, And so instead of having to like have the palimpsest, you have to incorporate all these identities at once, because you're always going to have to deal with people saying, I saw that picture from 2013 when you were doing this, and that's still you. Yeah, I feel like
It's kind of like you're expected to hold up to what everyone has seen of you in the past.
yes.
Like, there is some of that, like even just like in normal life, if you see someone that you haven't seen in 2 years, and then there's this awkward moment where you both have to like adjust what you see them as because they've changed. But online, they don't have to do that because they can always call back that evidence, like, what you did this. Like,
Yeah.
there is just, you're held accountable for everything that's ever happened, so no one's perception of you is allowed to.
Yeah, right. And so as you want to adapt and as you see yourself adapting, I love that what Grace said about like that being our most human quality. That's like the most inhuman part of the internet, is that you're not allowed to adapt from that. Yeah.
This reminds me of the technology unit we did like last year, I
Yes,
think,
that
where
story.
there's a story about the new memory device that would let you like remember and record everything and be able to like go back to it at any moment. and stuff.
Right. And there are people, and this might be you, this might not be you. I know some people who is not on social media at all in here. Anybody? Good for you. Good for you. I know. Everyone's like, it should be.
That's cool.
But it's like there are some people who that's a reality. They are recording most moments from their life. They have
Kardashians.
lots and lots of evidence that is sort of like built up. Okay, so that's obviously a problem for like our own identity. And Tolentino is talking about a problem that kind of like goes along with this, which is the problem of performance. So I think with Gatsby, we were talking about, you know, which version is your true self? Was that with Gatsby? I can't remember.
I think
Yeah,
we're
Like we were talking about like authenticity, yeah, and like how you perform differently in different settings, right? So like when I'm here at work, I'm performing differently than when I am at home versus like when I'm at church or when I am at, you know, a rave. I'm inventing things that I don't do, but so like all these different settings, you change your personality, right? So she's talking about this guy Goffman, who's a really prominent psychologist who has this idea that it's not just that you're performing sometimes. Like I would say that this self right here is me performing a little bit more than I would in front of my friends, right? But he says that you're not just performing sometimes, you're performing all the time. It's always 100% of the time of performance. It's never like really authentically you because you always have an audience. And she points out, even when you are alone, people tend to look in the mirror and they start to perform to themselves. So it's like always imagining that you're performing, right? And Goffman is like, that is perfectly fine. We are totally healthy for the people who are, because you get a break in the performance. Like, because when I'm up here, I can be teacher me, and when I'm at home, I can be, you know, home me, and that I get a relief from teacher me when I am at home, right? And what Tolentino's pointing out here is that with the internet, you never get that relief. You always have to have those performances. And I'm saying those performances, like, obviously, like, so I have my, you know, teacher performance. No, let's do it the other way. I have my home performance, but I post on social media. Now all my students can see my home performance, so that it's like when I'm at home, I also now can't be authentically me. I can't do the home performance because my students might see it. Does that make sense? Or some teachers have gotten into big trouble for, like, not in Utah really, but in other places, for like going out drinking, and they'll have their drinking pictures like posted online, and the school will be like, this is not the self that you can present to the world, so that suddenly the, you know, at the club self can't be part of their performance anymore. And so like these performances all become mixed up. And I think the real problem is when the performances of different ages become mixed up. When it's like my performance of myself at, I don't have online stuff from junior high, but like from like 11th grade in high school, that I still have to like be considering that performance when I am performing now as a 37-year-old. And that gets so cluttered and so exhausting to handle like all of those different performances at once. Whereas before, you could just be a totally different person in a different setting and nobody's gonna know.
Well, one thing that I think of, like, honestly, I don't feel like reports, they don't post that much, but like when I'm texting people, I hate it because, and I use emojis all the time, I'm not too obsessed with them, but I hate how like you write something down and it's always taken out of context because they can't see your face, your tonation.
Yeah.
Like I had this one friend, she texted me this one thing years ago. I thought it was super mean, but then I felt in my head, how would she say this? Like coming from her mouth, not words on a page.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, she's not being rude. So like there's so often that it just doesn't transfer well on the internet. It's not like a video, so you can't see your eyes, you know. So I just use emojis to say like, look, I'm smiling when I'm saying this. I'm laughing, you know, like stuff like that.
And we'll talk about
because
emojis as like a limited form of language
It
too.
is,
But
like, it only goes so far. That just helps you feel a little bit better
Right.
about it.
Right.
But in person is so much better because people can understand.
Right. So there's also a way that our performances are in danger of being like misunderstood too, without context, and then that always follows you forever.
Like,
Yeah,
I-
just
I think too, like in reference to like more specifically like you know, our past selves, you know how people like I think the issue a little bit with like people looking at their past or you looking at your past, a lot of times with cancel culture too, people obviously if you're trying to like become the most regular selves or whatever that stay with us, people aren't looking at that necessarily when they're doing cancel culture or when
Right.
they're trying to judge you. They're looking at like other small things that might like you know like fall off later that might not be a part of you, and so I think it's probably more like with that specifically, it's probably more of like how we judge people is what needs to necessarily change. It's not necessarily social media itself. It's like maybe we, right? It's like a huge circle and there's like little circles of ourselves, but sometimes those small circles will fall away, but people are still looking back at those small circles even though they might either. I don't know. if it's
Yeah.
already makes
No,
sense.
it does make sense. So it sounds like we have to have a little bit more grace when we're considering how people have changed and recognizing that we should maybe be celebrating the change even more than the always being perfect. Austin?
This goes back to what Elsa was saying about the tone, because people use too. And
Yeah.
so like when I'm texting my grandma, I'm gonna text her differently than I would text somebody else.
Yeah.
And so like I'll be like, oh grandma, I love you, with like smiles and stuff. But then like I'll text my friend Molly and say something super like passive aggressive, but I'll send it with like lots of no, I think that's funny. I think that's really funny. And so I'll say something that's like kind of snarky, or I'll be like, oh, I'm really over it today. And then I'll do it with like a bunch of like happy and cute emojis to be like, this is why like this show my sarcasm.
Yeah. I think we're gonna have to totally. I think we're gonna have to save the emojis conversation for when we read the essay about emojis because it's so complicated. The way that it works differently. But okay, last two comments here. Aaliyah and then Kira. Yeah.
Because basically what Austin said, but like, I'll text people with a smiley face and it'll be genuine, and I'll be a straight up gremlin, and then just put like a smiley face and a thumbs up.
I always do cool guy shades to make things okay. Nobody ever gets it though, but I like cool guy shades to be like, see, I'm just being a cool guy. You know what I mean? That one. That's what I should do. Kaylee.
So it's kind of something I haven't realized too, but it's like harder to see. Like if you have a birthday party, you invite friends from like multiple places, like you invite some friends from like
Yes.
church and also friends from like extracurricular and also from school. Like they all come together, and everyone gets a little bit different piece of you because you adjust yourself in a way that will make yourself like fit in better
Yes.
in your different circumstances. So then when everything comes together, you're in this weird place of not knowing how to be all of the selves that you are. And it's not that any of them are necessarily not you, but it's hard to be them all at once. And so that's kind of what happens on the internet is because you have to be everything all at once.
That is exactly what she is talking about. Yeah, because at any one moment, anyone from these different social circles can come across the version that you've put online and the different things that you've put online. So she says, this is the quote that I love from her. She says, now I'm 30 and most of my life is inextricable from the internet and its mazes of incessant forced connection. This feverish, electric, unlivable hell. She's very upset with how she lives in this internet world. It's mazes, so it's confused, of incessant forced connection. So it is never ending, it is not chosen, and you never get to be solitary. And she calls this feverish, electric, and unlivable, and also hell. So that's Gia Tolentino, and you can, I think that in some ways she has an old person's view of the internet. Like, I think in some ways we could update some of her views, and I think you might find ways, our discussion last time showed that there are ways of seeing it differently. So put that one aside for now, and we're gonna look at Susan Sontag.
Okay.
Really? Why? Oh, I see. You're like, it used to be art and now it is just like control.
She asked me to do something and I was down a lot of texture really fast. I don't. And then any punctuation.
Sounds like I don't want to go together. How did you take it? Were you like, is she mad?
No, I was just like, okay. It didn't even like sound like Alexios. I was like, there's gotta be something more than this.
So funny.
I know. I was like, Mom. It sounded like I was like, you're not.
You try to like.
I was just taking her back. I was like,
Does anyone need a copy of this? each page of this essay has a new set of little arguments about photography. So we're gonna divide and conquer with this essay. Before we do that, I wanna know why you take pictures.
It's funny. Just take pictures of my
All right, do we have any artists in here? Okay, why do the artists take pictures? Yeah.
Well, that's the only way I can do art. So I'm not very good at like drawing or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I can do it. I've been doing it on myself this whole class year, but I prefer to be able to do art with camera because then I can show what I see, like the perspective and stuff.
Okay, show your own perspective, right, as sort of artistic expression, the same way with like a drawing or painting would work. Yeah. Sure, yeah, she was writing before people had access to video cameras very.
Okay, so it's not like, right, I was a dancer for a very long time. A lot of times we take videos just to review our own, like, the shapes our bodies are making, or like, if we're like engaged and all that stuff. A lot of times it's you like, yeah, like, critique ourselves.
Okay, I'm gonna say critique ourselves, but also critique others. I think that is also sort of, yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I would say that's probably the primary reason that I use it is like, I just want to have sort of record so that I can go back and look and remember. Yeah.
I feel like proud things like,
Ah,
like, group that you actually went on.
there we go. You can say I actually did this. Proof that I did something. Okay, yeah.
I think like progress to show how you got.
Awesome. I think that's a big reason why your parents take pictures of you, right? Like partly for the memories, but partly because it's so fun to look back and see all these pictures of you as little babies and see what you've become. So it's this progress. Yeah, awesome.
But like when I'm in a moment, I'm very happy with what I like that I saw, you know, what's happening, or if something funny is happening, then I'll video it. Like my friend James was shotgunning a monster at work the other day, and it was really funny, so I videoed it. But then also, like if I'm with somebody that doesn't have the happy.
Okay, so it's keep the memories, and part of that is to keep the emotions from that.
And like, like, like either a job or like college.
Oh, okay. So it, why do they want it?
Well, like for if you're like trying to play dance and they want to see like good.
So it's not just about you doing something, it's like evidence of who you are. It's supposed to represent that. Alistair?
My parents always like when I take pictures when I go out so they can see like, oh, you're here, I'm doing drugs.
Oh, my parents.
I think that's to see that I'm having fun.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
like, my parents yeah, if I'm going out on a date, my mom says, "Oh, you need to make these like picture of like."
So this sounds like negative, like keep track of each other, but also in this really positive way too. Like keep track of what people are doing and you want other people to keep track of you. So it's this like way of connecting. Claire?
I don't know if this is like which memories, but whenever something is funny, I take a picture of it.
What?
Comedic value.
Just to laugh at it later. Like,
Okay. So it's like keeping the emotions, keeping like, especially the happy ones. Would you agree we take pictures more of happy stuff than sad stuff in our lives? Yeah. I mean, some sad stuff. Hang on. Keep raising our hands. Elsa.
I'd say there's something like I just think they're beautiful and I want to like keep them in my mind. Like if I'm going on a hike, my mom likes to do it where like she's looking through her camera. Like she's like always like taking pictures. Like, oh, it didn't happen, we weren't here. But then I'm kind of like, I'll take one picture like the whole hike and that will just be my memory of it. But I prefer to like live in the moment, you know?
Yeah,
Instead
so
of like
if you do take a picture, then it's for its aesthetic value then.
yeah.
Actually, there's a famous film critic named Stephen Krakauer, not that that matters, but he said that that's sort of like the power of film is that you can take a picture and you can force people's attention onto these little things that we don't pay attention to enough. So like looking at the sunlight through the trees and saying, no, let's actually look at this for a little while and appreciate it. Aaliyah?
Gotta let 'em-
You know, just to remind people that you are.
You're doing it for attention.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of us are that's
They're
selfish,
probably-
right? We're doing it for attention. All right, I'm gonna do 3 more comments, then we're gonna move on to something. Yeah, awesome.
Okay, so, something I'm a bad person, but like when my friends are doing something dumb, I take pictures of them so they can have.
Oh,
Yeah, like.
Yeah.
Are you gonna send it to HHS Sleeps?
Probably.
Zoe. Yeah, so it's like a replacement for memory. It's not just about keeping these emotional memories, it's like actually practical memories, yeah. Audrey?
So cool. And people look like, I can't see it through there, so take a picture, remember that like it looks so much better in real life.
Oh, interesting. So appreciate beauty almost through its opposite, like, and depreciate the photo. Interesting. Okay, so I think all these totally legitimate reasons for taking pictures. Susan Sontag agrees with some of these, that these are the reasons we take pictures. She doesn't think of some of them, or she doesn't choose to write about some of them. I don't think she is talking about artistic photos so much as she is talking about everyday photos. But if she does see these as reasons we take pictures, she is looking at them fully negatively. Like this is the most negative photography essay I know of, where it is like taking so many pictures is a bad thing, and it shows what's bad about us as people. So one thing that she says is on the first page, end of the first paragraph. She says, photographs really are experience captured, and the camera is the ideal arm of consciousness in its acquisitive mood. And I think this is really like standard Susan Sontag writing. Like it's a little bit convoluted. So let's pick it up. Let's pick it apart. What does it mean to be what does acquisitive mean? That's a different word. What's the word you're thinking of? Inquisitive. What does acquisitive mean?
Excessively interested in acquiring unequal.
Acquiring things, right? So if your consciousness is in an acquisitive mood, what could that mean? You want to acquire things, right? And your mind is like in this mood to acquire. You're in an acquisitive mood. So let's pretend that, like, I don't know, my little kid is playing on the playground. Let's give him a swing. There he is. He's swinging on a swing, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, he looks so cute. I want to capture this moment. What Susan Sontag is saying is that this is me over here. Here's my consciousness. As a brain. So here's my consciousness, and I'm like, oh, there's my kid. I don't want to like appreciate this moment in the moment. I want to capture this moment. I want to own this moment. So I'm going to take a photograph of that moment, and that is going to become mine now, right? So it's like this ownership issue. And it's saying that like, because my consciousness has framed this image in the way that I want to frame it, we can also think about it, and she talks about this a little bit later, we can also think about the way the photograph then affects our mind. How many of you guys have pictures from when you were a kid where you swear you remember exactly that event, but it's probably you remembering the picture, right? I have tons of stuff like that, like little videos where I'm like, no, I remember. Like we have, when I was a little kid, we moved to Samoa for a year. And yeah, my dad was a physical therapist in Samoa for a while. And my grandparents gave us a video camera because they wanted, like Alistair said, they like wanted to keep track of what we were doing. And so I swear I remember Samoa, but I was like 4 or 5. And most of the stuff I remember, it's not just a coincidence that the stuff I remember is also in the video, you know? Like I'm really remembering the video and probably watching the video at 10 and 12 and 14. And as that photograph is sort of like entering my consciousness, it's changing also like how I'm viewing the photograph. So it kind of goes back and forth like that. Yeah, Zoe.
And I think especially from the person who's not experienced, like, because there's so much that can be altered behind the scenes. Like, I just had to create this consumer company and like this broken pottery, and I had to have like all these things behind the broken pot so that it would hold up. And everybody knows that. Like, it's just like a little thing that I know. There's so many things happening like that made it the perfect picture. So when you look at it, it seems like, oh, this actually happened. But it could be like, yeah, completely opposite. You know, like someone could be upset in the photo and they're like right before, like, oh, just smile. You know.
Yeah, there could be like, you know, this is a dog. There could be a dog just off camera coming to kill my poor little person in the frame, right? And yeah, I'm gonna remember the happy part of the frame. Oh, you see a picture of my dog? That's a dog. Or a giant rat.
That's an ROUS.
So you're capturing consciousness here when you take a picture, and that's sort of what Zoe's talking about,
Gracing the
right? It's
street
this
for people.
idea that really what you are capturing is not reality. What you are capturing is the way you see reality. And then it goes the other way where consciousness is, well, let's do it this way. The photo captures consciousness too. Because now that you knew that that photograph was taped, I mean, unless that was this giant event in your life, you're probably going to forget about the details of it. And that photo is going to go influencing your mind. So it's like this almost like endless circle where you're just confirming your own viewpoint over and over and over again and not getting out of that viewpoint, which is the opposite of what we think photos do, because we think photos are this like evidence proof that we can like provide some clear documentation, but really they're a rhetorical tool like anything else, you know? Luke?
So our photographs of that thing, if we're gonna forget it anyways, we're gonna forget the memory anyways, why not have it there?
Why not have this? I don't know. What do you think?
Well,
Susan
yeah,
Sontag would say, well, that's not authentic. That's not real life. So that's a bad thing.
But then if we're gonna forget it.
That would be real life though. Like let your brain forget things.
So this is the new.
Yeah, but this becomes the new reality. Just
I think too, like, kind of with that, right? Like, one, you're gonna forget it. But I also believe we already do this just with prior to photos, right? We do these like, I know, like, I remember like reading studies and stuff like that, where like people already their memories are already.
yeah.
When you look back on your past, right, you're already looking at your own bias. You were a child and you remember it as a child.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe you were like older in that situation and you did. So one, you're already looking at it and the bias kind of formed with you, you're capturing that consciousness. You already do that without photos.
Yeah.
And then you constantly looking back and will always get switched. Memory's not perfect. So either way, whenever you're going to be looking back on memories, it's not going to be super accurate. But I think photos are going to be more accurate than you try to remember something without using the phone.
Yes, that does make sense. You're saying either way, this process is happening. This just makes it a little less hazy. Yeah. Tenley.
I remember a story in like how their friend had a story and they told it to them, and once they grew up, they remember hearing that story, but then they ended up switching it to be them and thinking that it was they did that instead of it was their friends.
Uh-huh.
I feel like that can happen like you could see the picture from someone else's perspective. I'd be like, oh wait, yeah, I did do it.
Yeah, and maybe what Josie was talking about is because pictures aren't so hazy, it actually becomes more of a, if you think this is a problem, which I don't necessarily think it is either, but if this is a problem, you could become more detached from reality than if you were just telling memories. Okay.
I can't even tell if we have people's dreams or reality.
Yeah.
So I feel like photographs like add at least like, okay, something happened here, as opposed to like when I'm like trying to think of stuff, I'm like, I flew a kite with Elma, no, that's probably a dream.
Yeah.
So I don't know, there's that. I don't know if I go to the bathroom.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I like that because the idea is like this kid really did swing on the swing. Even if I posed him there, even if he's not my son, even if I cut out the dog, that did capture a kind of reality. Yeah, also.
Okay, I also have 2 points, and the first point is my mom was telling me the other day how people's brains work where, like, especially in childhood, you only remember, like, the things that, like, happen again and again and again, like, the happy, like, functional things you don't remember those as much, because they're just easily fading in the background, which is so normal, but you recall more easily, like, sad, traumatic moments.
Or the exciting moments
Yeah,
too.
the
It doesn't
exciting,
have to be
so-
the negative, but yeah.
She's like saying like trauma like shows the most, like you remember that. So like you might not remember those things. So it's really nice to say like, I know I had a happy childhood, but like here's the proof because I can't remember. Like I can't remember what's my childhood. It was really happy, but I know that I had a great one. And then my second point is a lot of the time when I like read a book, and then I watch the movie, I only remember the movie because it's so much simpler than the entire story of the book, which is like so we're just remembering one moment, and you just remember that above the entire story that was in like the book.
That makes a lot of sense to me. That this is a simplified
Yeah.
version of the
So
moment.
it's easier
Yeah.
for your brain to latch onto that and just remember that instead of having to remember like plot points of your life for the
Right.
entire day,
Right. So maybe we want to build these little movies of our life. My husband this year is doing one of those 1 second to days, and it has been delightful. Like, oh my gosh, all these fun things that we did. I think he's just doing it privately.
Yeah, watching my video, oh wait,
Yeah, and like how happy everything was on, like
in June, I'm so happy.
or even if you're capturing like sad things, it's like, wow, I've lived a life, and in some ways that's good. And also what you were saying about trauma, like this is not going to be a happy event, right? Whatever's happening over here. And if we can reframe our minds to be happier, even if it's not based on reality, is that so bad? I don't know. Claire?
I was just gonna say, that's why I think that writing in the journal is important.
For the kind of similar reason to keep track of these things?
Yeah, because then it's not ever for show, and like I would never like take a picture of what I write and post it anywhere.
Yeah.
So like it's just for yourself. So I think if you're like trying to like, if your goal is to remember what actually happened and like, everything about it, like, to write it down. But if that's not your goal, if it's just like to take a picture to like remember like that time in your life, like not exactly every detail, then I think it's fine. But I don't think like
It's not a good tool for memory specifically and like remembering who you were. Okay. All right, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna give, we gotta be in little groups. I can let you choose your own groups this time, but you gotta be in a little group. So choose your group members and sit by them, and then I will give you the assignment. Give me a second.
How many people could be in groups?
5.
6? 6?
Oh, and Kaylee's coming back, right?
That's good.
You're gonna be in this group over here? This is a group of what? 6. You guys are all such good friends with each other, right?
Yeah.
When Kaylee comes back.
Laptop.
Agreed? Alright, I want,
Wait. How's the ball not slide off?
okay, this giant group, you guys are on page number 3.
Of what? Okay.
You guys are on the 4th page. This giant group right here.
Of what? Green?
You guys, yellow. You guys are on the 5th page.
What?
Ah, shoot. Well, then you guys are also on the 5th page.
Wait.
So what you're gonna do, is you're gonna look through your notes on that page. Hopefully you have enough notes to remember what it says and you don't have to rewrite.
Okay, this one.
You're, sorry, yeah, mine is yellow, yours is purple.
Oh, okay.
You're gonna look through your notes on that page and you are going to find 3 arguments that Susan Sontag makes about photography. And you're gonna very clearly, on the back of your essay, you're gonna very clearly write what those arguments are. In your own words, you're putting 3 of her arguments on the back. Yeah.
Wait, on the back, like the purple sheet or the back?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I should hold up a purple when I'm doing this. Yeah, write it on the back of the purple sheet. What are 3 of her arguments from your assigned page?
On the purple sheet? Oh.
You don't need it? Oh, I see.
Luke, did you get one?
I'll give you one of these. Just in case.
The purple one, yes. Yes. Okay. Good talk.
An imaginary possession of our
Okay.
past
Yeah.
It has changed the way we think about
It hardly matters what activities get photographed. Just not photographs are taken.
No, I'm not sure. Where it is. And I don't know what's not.
If you're working at home, you can choose whichever page you want. Just do one page and find 3 arguments. Okay, now you have the 3 arguments from her page. You need to take pictures that prove that this is true about photography. So it needs to be at least 3 pictures, one for each point that proves what she's saying is an aspect of photography and taking photographs. Okay, the last part, I've got 5 questions. You can pause it. I hope you're able to, is it backwards for you? All right, let me write it on a whiteboard. Here are the questions. So 5 different questions here. You're going to decide what you believe about that the answer is to these, not necessarily what Sontag believes. And you're going to take 5 more pictures that show what the show what your argument is about each of these questions. And that is it for today. So just upload your photographs to the Canvas page. If you're having a hard time with that, then send them to me. And that'll be proof of your participation.